Academic Standard Philosophy course. Hi everyone! Did the Crusade have anything to do with philosophy? We learned in history classes only that Roman Catholicism rose and the Crusades occurred.
It was a head-on collision between the Western and the Eastern. The differences in their lifestyles also become clear.
I see, the former may be uniform and exclusive, while the latter may be plural and fusional. Anyway, both will be complicated.
The key to understanding that is, the point of contact between the West and the East, the Byzantine Empire. We will review the history, since the 6th century. After the Western Roman Empire declined, due to the invasions of the Germanics and the Huns, Byzantine Emperor Justinian I barely regained the western side to Italy, in the 6th century. However, on the eastern side, the unknown Hungarians from the Far East settled in inland Pannonia, while the Slavs from the north came to the western coast of the Black Sea.
It is impossible to restore the glory of the previous Roman Empire.
The medieval warm period of the 8th century also transformed Central Asia into a desert, and the Turkic Bulgars migrated to the western coast of the Black Sea, establishing Bulgaria, alongside the Slavic inhabitants. Meanwhile, the Islamic Umayyad, suffering from desertification too, invaded for food the Turkic Khazars of the north over the Caucasus.
This was the same time that the Norman Vikings invaded Europe, right?
The Islamic Umayyads threatened even the Byzantine Empire, so the Byzantine Empire cooperated with the Khazars against the Umayyads. The Umayyads accepted Jews as believers in the same God, furthermore they protected them as court merchants. However, under Islam, the Kharites, the extreme Jewish fundamentalists were born, and came into conflict with ordinary Jews. In addition, the defeat at the Battle of Tours in 732 brought turmoil, even within the Umayyads. So the Kharites fled to the Khazars.
Whenever a foreigner rules the Jews, they would try to revert to their extreme roots.
Between the Christian Byzantine Empire to the west, the Norman Rus to the north, and the Islamic Abbasid Empire to the south, the Turkic Khazars sought neutrality, and converted to Karaite Judaism. However, fearing Jewish power would expand into Bulgaria, the Byzantines tried to compel the Bulgarians to adopt the Eastern Church.
The Romans remembered that Judaism had once tried to take over the ancient empire.
A Turkic nomad in northern Central Asia converted to Islam, and ruled the Silk Road, as the Karakhanids. However, in the Fergana Valley of the Far East, influenced by Persian Ismaili Shiites, Indian Brahmanism, and Chinese Pure Landism, some believed in a new heretic cult, Muwahidunism, with the single god and reincarnation. In addition, the secular Persian Safarids appeared in Iran. The Islamic Persians swept Turkic nomads around Samarkand, and opposed the Safarids. So granted autonomy by the Abbasids, they established the Samarnid dynasty. The Samarnids sent the defeated slaves to their suzerain, but the Abbasids valued them for their fighting ability, and used them as a direct private army, the Mamluks. At the same time, the Syrian Kurds, believing that an honorable person should become caliph, regardless of race or ethnicity, established their own Hamdarnid dynasty.
The Arab Abbasids had a hard time managing Persian Central Asia.
Bulgaria had suffered under the rule of the Byzantine Empire for many years, but the king Simeon I conversely invaded the Byzantines, and proclaimed himself the emperor, in 894. In addition, he adopted the Gnostic Christianity, Bogomilism, to oppose the Byzantines' Eastern Christianity and the Khazars' Karaite Judaism.
Gnosticism was Hellenistic dualism, hating the Jewish creator God as a devil who had trapped us in this world. It was considered heresy by both the Roman and Eastern churches, but it would be convenient to remain neutral.
The northern German Duchy of Saxony was suffering from invasions by the Normans from the north, the Slavs from the northeast, and the Hungarians from the east. However, the nominal East Frankish king was ineffective, so the Duke had to repel them on his own. In 919, although a Saxon, Duke Henry I became the king of East Francia.
Now began the era where ability was over family.
Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII pushed back the Bulgarian Empire, with diplomatic relations with the Norman Rus, the Saxonian East Frank, and the Iberian Umayyad. As called Porphyrogenitas, he was an exceptionally cultured man. Surrounded by books and scholars, he studied history and nature, collected art and crafts, and also wrote and painted. His empress was also well educated, and enjoyed that with him. Thus, they led to the Macedonian Renaissance, as patrons for scholars and artists.
Culture is also the power. Especially the legacy of the great Roman Empire was fascinating.
As the Abbasids were weakened by the Umayyads in Iberia, the Fatimids in North Africa, and the Buyids in Iran, the palace of the Hamdanids in Aleppo became the center of Islamic culture, instead of the Abbasids' capital Baghdad. Many famous figures were born there, including the poet Al-Mutanabbi, whose poetry was characterized by courage and wit, and the female astronomer Al-Ajliya, also known as Maryam al-Astrolabiya, who invented the astrolabe for astronomical surveys. As well, the Iberian Umayyad also established a university, in the Zafrar Palace of the capital Córdoba, with a library of 400,000 volumes, attracting many students even from Europe.
By the way, what was the situation in Europe at the time?
The adulteress Marozia of the Pornicracy was killed in prison, and her grandson, Pope John XII, recklessly tried to expand the Papal States, and was conversely attacked by an Italian load. He asked for help, from the East Frankish King Otto I, a son of Henry I. However, in return, he had to crown Otto I, Holy Roman Emperor, in 962. The Emperor Otto I utilized the spread of clerics as his bureaucrats, and took over the entire monastic rule in Europe. He also married his son to a Byzantine princess, and introduced the Macedonian Renaissance to Italy.
The end of the Dark Age of religious domination was in sight.
The Norman Rus of the north, and the Bulgarian Empire of the west, defeated the Khazars in 965. The converted Turkic Karaite Jews fled west into Hungary and Slavic lands, as Ashkenazim. The North African Ismaili Shiite Fatimids conquered Egypt in 969, founded a new capital Cairo, and expanded their influence into southern Syria. However, North Africa gained independence, with the establishment of the Sunni Zirids, in 983.
It seems they had opened Pandora's box.
Since the Roman ages, a Jewish community had existed in Cologne. For the need of financial support to oppose the Muslims of Iberia, the Frankish kingdom also gave them preferential treatment. Additionally, in the 10th century, many Jews from Italy and France migrated to the Rhine River region, where they gained control of long-distance trade. Mainz in particular became their cultural center, with a Jewish academy, yeshiva.
They will become flashpoints someday.
As the successor to the Sassanid dynasty, the Samarnids revived Persian culture, at the court of Bukhara. However, their suzerain, the Arab Abbasids, attempted to monitor Central Asia, through the slave Mamluks, their direct private army. Some Turkic nomads such as the Seljuks disliked the Mamluks, as traitors of the Turkic nomads. They dared to convert to Islam, and serve the Persian Samarnids. However, the Turkic Mamluks established the Ghaznavid dynasty in southern Afghanistan, and destroyed the Persian Samarnids in 999.
Didn't the church hold any events in the year 1000 CE?
They did not know the exact year when Jesus was born. So they instead used for the moment, the martyrdom era, which began in 284 CE, when many were martyred by the persecutions of Emperor Diocletian. Therefore, the year was just 716 ME, in the church.
The millennium was still a vague mystery to them.
Meanwhile, by losing the Samarnids, the old Persian poet Ferdowsi, and the young Central Asian physician, Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna, were perplexed. Ferdowsi had written the Shahnameh, an epic of Persian kings, over 30 years. When he finished it, he reluctantly presented it to the Turkic Mamluks Ghaznavids, but was never welcomed. Although Ibn Sina had been studying Aristotle through the works of Al-Farabi of the same Central Asia, he had no way to move and serve the 12 Shiite Buyids of Iran, where he compiled the medical canon and the philosophical book of healing.
The cult of the Samarids would have many more intellectuals, and they would have nowhere to go.
In the Fatimids of Egypt, Caliph al-Hakim thoroughly implemented Ismaili Shiite ideology. Not only did he wear shabby clothes, but he also banned wine, music, and even bathing, for ordinary people. He also destroyed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. He expanded the empire, and absorbed the Kurdish Hamdanids in Syria. He built a university, Dar al-Ilm, a center of science, in the capital Cairo, to rival Beit al-Hikmah of the Abbasids in Baghdad.
He was like a transplant of the vibrant Hamdanid cult culture, in Aleppo to Cairo.
About 1016, the Fergana heretic Muwahidunists, Hamza ibn Ali and al-Darazi, arrived in Cairo, from the ruined Samarnids. Both were at odds, but competed with each other, in preaching. They claimed that, Caliph al-Hakim was the very incarnation of God, however, al-Hakim hated and executed them. Nevertheless, Muwahidunism became significant in the Levant.
These Ma'alili Shiites of the Fatimids must have invited them.
Adding the Turkic converted Karaite Jews, Hungary eventually invaded its old rival, Bulgaria, and the Byzantines ruined Bulgaria in 1018. The Bulgarian Gnostic Bogomils fled to Europe. They were also known as Cathars, and they hated not only the Jews, but also the Catholic political corruption. They gained new support from many downtrodden, familiar people, and peasants.
They would also become troublesome someday.
Caliph al-Hakim went suddenly missing, in 1021. Muwahidunism gained popularity more, but the Fatimids declined. That became possible, for many pilgrims of various religions, to visit Jerusalem, and it prospered as an international trading hub. The Muwahidunists increasing in the Levant, also might not be Muslims anymore, but were friendly with the Jews and the Christians. In 1023, Amalfi merchants built a hostel for pilgrims, on the ruins of the monastery of St. John the Baptist, and entrusted it, to the Order of St. John, as known as the Hospitallers. Also in the west, the Iberian Umayyad collapsed into local clans, in 1031. A remnant of the Christian Visigoths in the north, and the Franks in the east, invaded the Islamic Iberia together, as the Reconquista.
I don't think Iberia originally belonged to either of them.
The numerous Cluny abbeys generated enormous wealth, making the positions of the Pope and bishops, the focus of a power struggle. In particular, Benedict IX, who became Pope in 1032, was the epitome of church corruption, with homosexuality and simony. He sold even the papacy, so the three popes stood simultaneously. The Holy Roman Emperor Henry III expelled all of them, in 1048, however, the new pope he installed was assassinated just 23 days later.
In the first place, has the Roman Catholics ever been clean?
The Turkic Seljuks, who had previously served the lost Samarnids, established their own independent state, at Nishapur in northern Persia, in 1035. Conspiring with the Abbasid Caliph under arrest, the chieftain of the Seljuks received the title of Sultan, and drove the Persian 12 Rashidite Buyids out of Baghdad, in 1055. The Seljuk Empire built Nizamiye schools in various major cities, teaching moderate jurisprudence and theology, that emphasized textual criticism and rational consideration, over local customs and personal revelation.
The Seljuks were Turkic, but they were the legitimate heirs of Sassanid and Samanid Persian culture.
Iberia Umayyad protected wealthy Jewish merchants, Sephardim, to promote the economy. However, the Catholic Reconquista plundered them too. They fled into southern France beyond the Pyrenees. Disappointed by the corrupt Catholics, and fearing the immigrant Jews, the people called in the Cathars. They believed that, their souls were imprisoned in the earthly polluted bodies, and practiced asceticism, to escape from reincarnation. They had no priests, but the Perfectes, who lived like monks and nuns, were believed they purify people.
The Cathars were originally Gnostic Bulgarians, who denied both Judaism and Catholicism.
Indeed, church corruption was flagrant. Supported by Holy Roman Emperor Conrad II, German Pope Leo IX worked hard to purify the church. Meanwhile, the Normans had already occupied northern France, and claimed the title Duke of Normandy. Moreover, they had circumnavigated the Iberian Peninsula, entered the Mediterranean, and also got North Africa, in 1048. Pope Leo IX fought against the Normans invading southern Italy, but died in 1053.
With the Normans, the problem became even more complicated.
True. Several clergymen vied for the papacy, while the Normans gained control of southern Italy. Pope Nicholas II allied himself rather with the Normans, and defeated the anti-pope by force, in 1059. Furthermore, he had the Normans recapture Sicily from the Muslims. Also in England, when the monarchy became extinct in 1066, the Viking king of Norway invaded. The king's relative repelled the attack, but the Duke of Normandy, William on the continent, defeated him, and took the English throne.
Finally, the Normans got their country.
With the Rhine Jews, the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV exploited the Saxons, and intervened in the church by appointing another pope. When the Saxon lords revolted against him, Pope Gregory VII, who was associated with the Normans, also excommunicated and deposed him. So, Henry IV had to travel to Canossa, to apologize to Pope Gregory VII, in 1077. However, Henry IV attacked Rome in 1081, expelled Gregory VII, and instead installed his puppet pope.
Pope, Emperor, the Normans, and the Jews, these were troublesome monsters.
The Turkic Seljuk Empire invited the northeastern Persian genius in mathematics and astronomy, Ömer Khayyam, to its capital Baghdad. He created the Jalurli calendar, more accurate than the European one. He was also a talented poet. He wrote many rubaiyat, praising wine and beautiful women, but with the mode of impermanence, although he did not publish them to avoid religious condemnation.
Although Seljuks were Turkic, they also respected the Persians.
Persian Al-Ghazali, as known as Al-Ghazalus, studied at the local Nizamiye, and was appointed a professor at the Nizamiye of the capital Baghdad. Although he was grounded in orthodox jurisprudence and theology, with a sense of crisis against the hollow authority of the ulama, and the blind dependence on the imams, he also studied Sufism, and explored the immaterial metaphysics of God.
He was a liberal, open-minded scholar.
In Norman England, Anselm also attempted to explore the metaphysics of God through realism, insisting that God is the greatest being, and that, if something is greater than human thinking, it should exist in reality. On the contrary, Russellinus, a monk of Paris, argued that God is just a name of word, because if God were a substance, then both the Creator and the Holy Spirit also must have been incarnated with Jesus.
Both arguments are far-fetched.
Suspected of being a tritheist, Russellinus fled to England in 1092. He debated the problem of universals against Anselm, but he was defeated and expelled. So Russellinus went to Rome, to preach the non-existence and independence of names, thus clearing up any misunderstandings. Demanded large money to appoint the Archbishop of Canterbury by the Norman King of England, Anselm had to flee to Rome too.
Different from Islam, Europe had no room for free research.
Although a warm climate increased food production, it also caused a population explosion in Europe. In addition, the migration of the Normans led to a land shortage and persistent conflicts. When the Seljuk Empire invaded Asia Minor, the Byzantine emperor requested mercenaries from the Roman Pope Urban II, in 1095. However, at that time, the emperor and the pope were engaged in a dispute over the right of investiture regarding church interests. Urban II saw this as an opportunity for the pope to regain control, and at the Council of Clermont, he launched the crusade to retake Jerusalem.
He must have planned to get a new colony in the Levant, and to abandon there the excessive people.
Peter the Hermit incited the people, and, first to gain the campaign funds, had them attack and rob the Rhine Jews in Cologne and Mainz, who were supporting the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV financially. He started with 40,000 people to the east, and they also plundered Jewish Ashkenazim villages in Hungary, descendants of the converted Turkic Khazars. Although they reached Byzantium, the Byzantine emperor, troubled by the hordes of robbers, drove them out immediately to Asia Minor, where they dispersed and disappeared.
They would have been the very excessive poor migrants.
Of course, regular troops of the crusade were also prepared. A bishop who was a former soldier played a central role. The Count of Toulouse, who had fought against Muslims in Iberia, and the Duke of Taranto, who had occupied southern Italy as a Norman, led the Germanic and Norman knights. Adding clergy and lay pilgrims, the Crusaders swelled to 100,000 people. The church renewal movement also gained momentum, and the Cistercian order, with its distinctive white robes, became independent from the corrupt Cluny order, which wore black robes, in 1098.
War is always happy, only before it begins.
However, surprisingly, the Crusaders could easily found their new colonies in Syria. In fact, the Sultan of the Seljuk Empire had already passed away in 1092, and a succession struggle had occurred. When the Crusaders got to Jerusalem in 1099, they massacred not only Muslims, but also the Jews and the Eastern Christians, and their kingdom of Jerusalem monopolized trade with Genoa and Venice, gaining enormous wealth.
After all, they were a gang of robbers too.
They had to protect the Holy Land, the pilgrims, and above all, their huge interests in Levant business, so even the local order of St. John began to arm themselves, as the Knights Hospitaller. Also on the European side, supported by Bernard of Clairvaux, a Cistercian monk, a military order, the Knights Templar, was established in 1118. Given the privileges of tax and service exemptions, it received huge donations from various lords. With this direct military power, the Pope compelled the Emperor to approve the Worms Concordat of 1122, stipulating that the Emperor had no authority to appoint any clergyman.
The Church's own army would be more effective than mercenaries or the Normans.
Abelard, who had a female student pregnant and was forced to become a monk, developed the nominalism of Ursellinus into conceptualism, which posits that universals do not exist in reality, but are held only as human concepts. However, this idea threatened the real universality of the Roman Catholic Church, so Bernard of Clairvaux, a Cistercian, thoroughly refuted him, and had him excommunicated in 1141.
Although the term Catholic meant universality in Greek, Abelard had denied the existency without deep thinking.
Sunni Islam, which places importance on community consensus, had conversely led to division and conflict between politically and ethnically different communities. In addition, the accumulation of consensus over the years had caused each community to loosen its Islamic discipline. Wine and pork were sold, and music and paintings were abundant in the towns. Ibn Tumurt of Morocco learned in Baghdad, and was influenced by Al-Ghazali of the Baghdad Nizamiyyah, who suspected the authority of the ulama and studied Sufism. Ibn Tumurt returned to North Africa, and preached another Muwahhidunism that emphasized the uniqueness of God, and aimed to revive the rigid unified discipline of the early Muslims. The movement spread, and his disciple established the Almohad dynasty.
He was the exact opposite of the Muwahhidunism of the Levant, which welcomed anything. Ibn Tumurt's Muwahhidunism was rather the fundamentalism or the Puritanism of Islam.
The Seljuk Empire ordered an influential general to expel the Christians. He established the Turkic Zengids and destroyed the Christian inland colony of Edessa in Syria in 1144. Bernard of Clairvaux recruited the Second Crusaders, and even prominent figures such as the King of France and the Holy Roman Emperor joined. Escorted by the Knights Templar, they reached Jerusalem, but lacked the fighting spirit, and disbanded there.
It was just a sightseeing trip of kings.
In 1163, the Jerusalem kingdom invaded even the weakened Fatimids of Egypt. However, on the other hand, the Berber Almohad dynasty in North Africa recaptured Iberia from the Christians, and transferred the capital to Seville, in 1169. It invited to the new court, Ibn Rushd, as known as Averroes. He studied Aristotle, after the Turkic Al-Farabi, the Central Asian Ibn Sina, and the Persian Al-Ghazali, but he was critical of them, because they were influenced by Neoplatonism. So, he wrote a new commentary for Aristotle, based on pure rationalism. The dynasty entrusted him with planning a new university.
European Christians were attacking the East, but being attacked in the West.
Attacked by the Christian Jerusalem kingdom, the Fatimids called for help to the Zengids of Syria. The Turkic Zengids sent a Kurdish general, Saladin. However, in Egypt, he added the Fatimid armies to his forces, and returned to Syria to conquer the Zengids. He restored the Kurdish Ayyubid dynasty, in 1183. He also attacked the Jerusalem kingdom, defeating the Templars and the Hospitallers, and recapturing the area, in 1187.
Even though they were the same Muslims, the Turks from the East were just invaders for the Syrian Kurds, as well as the Christians.
The Christian armies barely stayed at the port of Acre. Immediately, the Third Crusade was launched. Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, King Richard I of Norman England, and King Philip II of France participated in it, with a total of more than 70,000 soldiers. It recaptured most of the Christian colonies from Saladin, except for Jerusalem. Both parties were exhausted, and reached a peace agreement in 1192, allowing Jerusalem to remain under Muslim, while permitting European pilgrims to visit there.
It would be the best solution.
However, Saladin died the following year, in 1193. His two brothers and three sons divided the Ayyubid Empire, and fought among the Central Asian Turks, the Desert Arabs, the North African Berbers, and the Syrian Kurds. Numerous German forces newly arrived, and intervened in the conflicts, as the Teutonic Knights Order, exacerbating the situation. In Iberia, the Berber Almohad dynasty was also struggling with the Christian invasion. It requested assistance from the Arab tribes of the former Umayyads, but they were resistant to the Almohads' rigid Puritanism. Therefore, it had to refrain from Puritanism, expel the rationalist Ibn Rushd, and burn even his books.
Islam was ultimately nothing more than a confederation of ethnic tribes.